photographs scroll down. I think there are 350 photographs in the book, and that was one of the most challenging aspects of writing the book, and also one of the most fun, because National Geographic has an immense archive. And so we selected, as well as we could, things that tried to come toward the essence of what we think about Italy. I love this shot in the Dolomites. But let me just read while these go by. And what I thought I would do is just read the opening paragraph of some of my favorite areas. This one is Veneto. That's the region of Venice, the region around Venice. Venice, the most outrageously beautiful city in the world. By my lights, yes. A peak experience is a gondola ride late at night, especially into the small canals where lamplight from the palazzi falls in silvery bars onto the water, and you hear only the knocking of the oar and the small splash as it turns. If the gondolier sings, you know it's touristy, but your heart melts anyway. Glance up and see frescoed ceilings, heavy silk draperies, and glittering chandeliers. Who are those who live here, and what are they dreaming inside the damp and resplendent palazzi? It's the start of Veneto. This is the start of Calabria, which was a totally new area to me, way, way south. So many Italian Americans come from this region, but it's not a very visited tourist region at all. Un altro mondo, a Tuscan friend said. Calabria, another world. What's otherworldly is its beauty. Long flower-white beaches bordering a sea, shifting across the blue spectrum. Roadsides, dizzy with wildflowers, purple asters, Queen Anne's lace, pink morning glories, blooming cacti, and tumbles of vulgar magenta bougainvillea. If you drive north from the Reggio Calabria airport, you want to pull over often, for below lies the turquoise and cobalt and indigo Tyrrhenian Sea. This is the opening of Sardinia. Those cheeses look so good. Oh. Sardinia, light on the water. Everywhere I look along this almost 1,000-mile coastline, light is what I will remember. Rays clear down to the white sandy bottom, pebbles shimmering like opals, sun glancing along the surface of soft waves, sea colors shifting from transparent aquamarine to slate, all the way out to the finely drawn ink line of the horizon. On this island, the largest in the Mediterranean, except for Sicily, you're never far from the scent of the sea. So I wrote the introductions to the 20 regions, and those are just little openings from each of those chapters of those three. And Ondine is going to read, I can't guess what.
I'm going to read some of my sub-essays to your beautiful introductions. I love this one particularly because I had never gone on a truffle hunt for all the time that I'd lived here. And this headline came to me, truffles better than sex. Leaves cover the forest floor, wine red, banana yellow, ombre brown. Golden shafts of sunlight peek through the bare branches. The only sounds are the snap of twigs under waterproof boots. A fluffy white dog bounds ahead, flitting back and forth over the path at top speed. Vai, va! Go, go, calls her owner. She stops suddenly, pausing for a second before starting to jig frantically. Brava, brava, excellent, excellent, he encourages her. She puts her nose into the ground and he pulls her back from the collar, slipping her a piece of bread. Then gently he continues to excavate the earth with a tiny spade, past tree roots and small pieces of rock. "Merci!" He pulls a white truffle from the dirt with a delighted smile, takes it lovingly to his nose, then examines his size on his palm. This is the moment of victory.
That was one of my favorite photos too in the book, the man with the great truffle dog.
It's like, this is what he lives for, truffles.
Yes, so adorable. I love that kind of dog. It's called a Lagotto Romagnolo. It's just a special dog that loves to hunt truffles. I mentioned we were in all 20 regions of Italy, which we were quite proud of, because even not many Italians have been in all 20 regions. And I thought we might talk about that a little bit. Ondine, in going to all these areas, what did you find most surprising, either in areas or experience?
I mean, like you said in the introduction, it's amazing to me that in a country that's the size of Arizona, how varied it is. I mean, you can, from somewhere like Calabria, you know, the hot peppers, or just Florence, full of Renaissance, Rome as a setting for film, all the different wines, all of the different types of pasta. It's almost hard. It took us 2 years to do this project, and in each region, I just thought, my gosh, this is enough treasure for one country, let alone one region, one town, apart from each other. And there's also this rivalry, which I think makes it fun too, that people are like, this is the best truffle, this is the best museum, this is the best castello. And I think that kind of like trying to be the best actually has created, you know, this competition, and it's actually very exciting because they keep outdoing each other.
Yes, they do. I think that diversity was the most surprising thing to me. Of course, I've been in Italy for years, and I knew how different it was from top of the Dolomites down to the tip of Sicily, but just the concentrated traveling pointed up so much to me how each area has its own color of stone, its own pasta, its own dialect, its own art. And I guess when you look at the history, you learn why that is the case. It's always been divided into small areas. The Kingdom of Two Sicilies, Papal States, the Bourbons, everything was chopped into pieces and people were forbidden to travel. So they had to stay where they were. And so the result is what we got, Italy, as just this unparalleled, diverse place. And that was, to me, the most surprising thing in the travels, was how you could be, as you said, in a different country almost, instead of this tiny country being so incredibly various. That was really a big
Culture.
surprise for me. One thing we tried to do in the book was emphasize the outdoors. And Ondine's a marathon runner, and I think that is one of the things that drove that passion for us, trying to present Italy not as a place which is just past tense, things you go to see for archaeology and art and history, but also Italy now. That was one of our main goals, was presenting Italy as a country on the move and not at all stagnant into history, people moving forward. So one of those things was Ondine's great interest in the outdoors. And I know you've been running today in those beautiful hills around Pienza. Can you say a few things about outdoors that you particularly wanted to write about?
Well, I mean, it's a combination because the cities are so beautiful to run in. I've run the Rome Marathon twice and Florence once. And on those days, they close the city to traffic. So you start, for example, in Rome at the Colosseum and then run through Rome with no cars whatsoever. And suddenly you're at St. Peter's, you're coming through the Piazza del Popolo. It's really incredibly moving to see a city in that way. But also, I think in the 1960s and the 1970s, Italy really had this moment between sort of choosing industry and also national parks. And a lot of the sections of the book are around how basically people preserved parts of the country for walking, running, biking, and thankfully they did that because there were other parts of the country that were almost destroyed by building these huge factories or, you know, kind of doing beaches without really thinking about what the landscape would look like. And I always get my like running map, my national park thing going to see where to go in that particular area. And I think Italy's done a beautiful job with protecting huge parts of their land. But I don't think tourists really know about it.
That's right. Hardly anyone knows about these great places to go, particularly in the South. A lot of people do know about the mountains in the north, the Dolomite areas, great hiking, skiing, lots of winter activities, but the parks down in Molise and Basilicata. And one of the slides you saw was a field of wildflowers. Did you notice that one? That's over in the Marche. It's a gorgeous park over there. So that aspect is something we really wanted to talk about, was all the things there are to do outside cities. And I think we're probably, as travelers, all going to be looking more for off the beaten track kinds of places, more so than in the past. Of course, if you're going to Italy for the first time, the things you've got to see, you've got to go to Rome and Venice and Florence and all those major cities. But I'm a big proponent of getting off the route that most people are on and finding these less traveled cities, particularly in addition to the little places, the tiny town with the 15th century bread oven and the little seaside village where you can go out on an octopus boat, things like that, the little places. Cities like Genova and Torino, Catania, even Palermo. A lot of people have kind of fear of Palermo and Naples, but those cities that people often don't go to are places we really emphasized. And I think that kind of thinking is really good in thinking of how travel is going to change from now on, and seeking out, going to the places you want to go, but also seeking out these out of the way places is probably a great way to plan a trip. And I'm already planning trips, so I'm looking into some of these places that I haven't been. The outdoors was one of the big emphases, but we also wanted to present that aspect of Italy being new, that what's going on in other ways. We wanted the book to be a cultural guide as well as a see this, go here, eat here, sleep here, take this train, practical information. And and good information about all the places we love in Italy, but we wanted to emphasize new chefs, artisans, new hotels, architecture. For instance, in the north, there are these amazing museums designed by Renzo Piano and Mario Botti and Zaha Hadid, things that you don't really hear about that much, that are showing just how Italy is on cutting edge in many, many things. Ondine's interested in hotels, having built two in Pienza, and being a travel writer, staying in a lot of them. And so that was one of the things that we emphasized a lot, was what's happening in places to stay, do in terms of their communities and their sense of design, and lots of things having to do with the culture of the place that's not in the museum, and that is the writers of the place. And that was one of the things that thrilled me the most in writing the book, was revisiting all the Italian writers that I loved and being able for us to put them in the chapters. Because when you go to a place, the best thing to do is get the work of somebody who is from there and read it, because they have the sense of place. They know how the place has influenced who the people are, what they eat, what they think, what they wear. That sense of place, always your fingerprints on the writer, who can give you a key to the interior of the place and where you are being who you are if you live there. So we emphasized Italian writers, Natalia Ginsburg and Cesare Pavese and Leonardo Sciascia, Leopardi, Lampedusa, also foreign writers who love Italy, such as Patience Gray down in Puglia, D.H. Lawrence, Sea in Sardinia, Anne Cornelison, Tori Greca, let's see, who else? Jan Morris in Trieste. But in each region, we tried to include the writers. And Ondine, your interest in film was wonderful for that too, for this kind of cultural context.
Yeah, it's funny during this quarantine. You know, I watched The Talented Mr. Ripley again, Roman Holiday, Cinema Paradiso, these films that just sort of, you're here already, but they're just so, I think Italian film is so deep and so, it just transports you in this way. And even, The English Patient, that's the one that I literally was like crying, you know, watching The English Patient. And it's sort of, you know, not a cliche, but I couldn't believe to find myself in this time where I'm sort of weeping around, seeing the places that I see every day anyway. But Italian film has just been, from Bicycle Thief through Roman Holiday, through Talented Mr. Ripley, The Gladiator, English Patient, all of these things, high, low, kind of more intellectual, more happy films. But Italy has just been such a great stage for that kind of
Talented Mr. Ripley holds up too, doesn't it? It really does. I have a special fondness for that, because that production of that movie was how the movie of Under the Tuscan Sun came to be made. I was in a wine store in Pienza where Ondine lives, and this man came up to me and asked me what wine I was buying, and he was with a bunch of really scruffy Americans, and I just talked to him for a few minutes, and he finally said, where are you staying? And I said, well, we have a house in Cortona. And he said, oh, there's a wonderful book about Cortona. And my husband said, you mean Under the Tuscan Sun? And he said, yes. And he turned out to be the producer of the talented Mr. Ripley. And the scruffy people in the wine store were Matt Damon and Gwyneth Paltrow and all the other people who were in the movie. Anthony Puglia was there. And that was how the movie came about, because I happened to meet somebody in the wine store. So I'm always happy to hear anything about talented Mr. Ripley.
Yeah, but also the English Patient really holds up. I mean, so many beautiful scenes in the Val d'Orcia in Tuscany. And that's why I'm just constantly like, my gosh, 1968, Romeo and Juliet, Zeffirelli's version was filmed in Pienza. The Leopard, there's just so many books and so many films. I feel like I could live another 4 times of my lifetime and I would never even get through all the art and the literature and things that are offered here.
Yes, yeah, me too. Italy is endless. You would need many, many lifetimes to ever get to the bottom of it. But having been now to 20 regions, I feel like I do know a little bit about the country. Begin to know a little bit.
Who was the writer that first made you absolutely want to come here?
It wasn't a writer, really. I first wanted to go to Italy because of the art. I took art history in college, and Renaissance art and architecture and medieval art and medieval architecture. And I couldn't wait to get there to see some of the things that I had studied. And of course, when I got there, I had such a different impression. I was still, of course, interested in all the art, but I was in Bologna, and I remember everyone was sitting under those beautiful arcades having coffee. And I said to my husband, these people, look at them. They're jumping up, they're smoking, they're laughing, they're drinking, they're having a grand time. I think they're having more fun than we are. And so that was a kind of initial feeling about going to Italy, was the vivacity of the people. And I have to say that's why I've stayed. Much as I love the art and everything else about Italy, it's the people. They are incredible, and I'm so particularly proud of the way they have handled themselves during this crisis, because I always thought they were lawless, and I couldn't ever believe that they would stop smoking in restaurants, and they did. They're not really rule followers, but they've been amazing with these quarantines, and of course some exceptions, but mostly it hasn't been divisive. They've all understood the gravity of the situation and they've acted accordingly. It hasn't been polarized. Why is that, Ondine? How does that happen, that they've been so good about this?
I don't know. I mean, I think that, one of the things that comes to mind is during World War II, being on both sides of, being on one side and on the other side, and suffering so much more, I think, than we realized during the war, and trying to see things from various perspectives. But also even, one of the things that blows my mind here is that people think like a town over is completely different, the people are completely different, and yet when push comes to shove, they rally together if somebody else comes from the outside or something else is dangerous. They kind of are like, well, we're Italians, or we're, Tuscans, we're Umbrians, but there's a real there's a real kind of love for your neighbor and watching your neighbor, and not so much for government, not so much for the main government. It's more like, you bring me eggs, I bring you my tomatoes, you know. It's not so polarized in a certain way.
Yes, early on when they first started showing those films of people coming out on their balconies at night. Of course, we've seen them 1,000 times now, but to me, that just was so heartrending, that was that sense of wanting to get out and make contact with your neighbors, even though you couldn't. It seemed very Italian to me because they are very social. It's hard to generalize about a whole nation, but I think you can with Italy in a way that they want to kiss you on both cheeks. They want to hug, and it's extremely personal going into the piazza every morning. So it would always seemed particularly difficult to me to know that they weren't able to do that.
And I think
Now it's opening up there a bit. So things are gradually coming to the new normal, whatever that proves to be. And I think that travel for a long time is going to be kind of disrupted. But I'm already planning trips. I have my ticket for September 28th. I hope I'll be able to go.
But I also think that the idea of trolling here is just that, like, you don't have an anonymous city in the same way, at least in the countryside. It's sort of like, if somebody says something about you or about how you cook or whatever, like sooner or later, you're going to have that person in the piazza. And for better or worse, I kind of like that idea that you sort of, like, you don't make as good a ragu as me. Like, it's not going to be something that you post on the internet. And it's been interesting. Kids and stuff, we just don't have like the same technology in a way. So that's also been curious to see how, like, the kids in our school, like half the school doesn't have even a PC, not for financial reasons, but just because people are not into technology. So it's like been a huge, that also is a very big change here.
Yes. I think one of the first things I learned when I moved to village, a small town, was never say anything negative about anyone to anyone, because it'll get back at you if you do. You have to be very careful. I kind of knew that because I grew up in a small town in Georgia, but it's particularly true in small towns in Italy, I think.
So it's just about time to move into some questions from the audience, if that's okay with the two
Sure.
of you. I've got some great ones from the chat. I'm going to start off with a question from Emily T. She had a couple of sort of questions that all came together. But to start off, Frances, in the beginning of your talk, you mentioned a time when people were forbidden to travel in Italy, and she wondered when that was and a little more context about that.
It was forever. It's only after the unification of Italy in 1865. Italy is really a young country, and it only became united in 1865. And before that, it was all these tiny places, so you couldn't go anywhere. I always remember reading about the poet Leopardi in the Marche. He wanted to leave. He had a horrible family, and you had to have a passport. His parents wouldn't let him get a passport, even though his mother was so down on children that she said children should die before they're old enough to sin. So he really had a good reason to want to get out of there. He was stuck until he was in his 20s, I believe. People didn't go. You were on that farm. You were beholden to the owner. You had to give part of your crop to him. There just was also the geographical reasons of that, huge patch of Apennines separating places into small communities, not easy to get from place to place. So it's not that long that Italians have been traveling freely, just over 150 years. And that's why they have remained so unique. Each region is so unique.
There's a question in the chat from Wild Sinner, and I think it's a really good one. How did Frances and Ondine meet? How did you start working together?
Ondine?
Obviously Under the Tuscan Sun was a book that really influenced me, and I love travel memoirs, and we moved to Tuscany in 2003. So I had read the book before. I hadn't seen the movie. In fact, I think I've watched the movie once, and I've read the book like 10 times. And then Frances came to eat at our restaurant at one of our meals, and we spent the whole evening speaking together, and kind of a mutual admiration and seeing the difference of what we appreciated around Italy. Frances reached out to me and said, do you want to do this book together? And I was incredibly flattered. And I thought, gosh, this is going to be great, because we have really similar tastes and also different tastes. And I thought, if we can make this work, this will be really fun. Sort of have everything from kind of cocktail bars to literature to outdoor activities. And so that's how it happened.
The kind of symbiosis turned out to work very well, because Ondine has some specific interests that I feel are really complementary to mine, and vice versa. Like a wonderful part of the book is her interest in design and artisan shops, and I loved reading those parts as she was writing them. And I have a particular interest in wine and archaeology, so those were two areas that I kind of specialized in. I think for me, the hardest part of the book was the wine. Each chapter, each region has its section called In Your Glass, and the whole wine scene is so explosive in Italy, changing so rapidly, and so many areas who've traditionally had just plunk, really bad wine are now producing great wines. So getting to each region and trying to find out what the best wines of the region were, that was a challenge, because there's so many, and how much can you drink? It's just formidable trying to keep up with it. But we enjoyed the differences, and of course there are many overlaps in similar interests. And Pienza is about 45 minutes from Cortona, where I live. So we met a couple of times in the middle near Montechielo. We had dinners in Pienza and in Cortona, going back and forth. And it was a very enjoyable process. Of course, with a book this big, look how thick this thing is. It looks like one of those boxes of candy we used to get at Christmas. It's so big. There's a lot of fact checking and a lot of research. So we managed to get through that, though, didn't we?
One of the things that for me was, I went through a separation a few years before we started writing this book together, and obviously Under the Tuscan Sun, sort of trying to find your next chapter. Frances has been an incredible mentor to me in that way too. So yes, we both love Italy and all the regions, but I felt like Frances really supported me through a time where And even now, I'm not quite sure how it will all land. But she was always asking me the right questions, like who do you want to be, where do you want to live, you know, what are the books, what are the films that interest you? And that's exactly what I needed.
That's what happens when two women work together. You know, men can stick to the subject, but women can't. You know?
So a question related more to the provenance of the book and it coming together. This is actually back to Emily T. She had asked what National Geographic's role was in all of this and if all of the photographs are from them.
They sourced photographs from various photographers, and then they also used their archive. Ondine and I went once to their offices in Washington and saw the mock-ups and were able to give our feedback. And then when it all started to come together, we were in there with both feet giving our opinions. And in some cases we had, you know, some issues with things they had chosen, but incredibly, we are so pleased with the overall product now that it's done. But we assumed in the beginning they would be sending a photographer, and that it's just not the way things work that much anymore. It proves to be just really too expensive. One thing I like about the book is that it's printed in Italy. So many books now you see printed in Asia, and this was actually printed in Italy. Do you know where, Ondine? I don't even know where in Italy, but.
A couple days ago, it's from Verona.
From Verona, how wonderful. One of the most beautiful cities. I mean, the book came about because I had written before this book, another book called See You in the Piazza, and it's sitting here on my desk right here. That's a little town in Sicily, Scicli. This book was about traveling in small places, discovering new small places in Italy. And as I was researching that book and realizing how much I was enjoying traveling in these out-of-the-way places, it occurred to me then it would be wonderful to be able to go all over Italy searching out what's unique. So that book spilled over into this one. And so now I'm trying to write a book about home, and we'll see how that goes. You know?
I was thinking from that this seemed to be kind of collected to See You in the Piazza, which I really enjoyed last year. We have another good question here in the chat, and it's she asks, how do you think the virus will change Italy or the Italians? It's hard to imagine no hands or no hugs or missing big family meals.
Yeah, I don't know. I really don't know. I think we'll have to wait and see how it plays out, how long it's going to be plaguing us, and how quickly, the quicker we can get back to normal, the more normal I think things will resume. But I've seen a lot of articles recently. I don't know whether you have, Ondine, there, but people saying, will the double kiss ever come back? Maybe it wasn't a good idea to begin with. And we here, will people start shaking hands again? I really don't know. And I don't think anybody really knows at this point. Do you, Ondine?
I mean, I think you have the safety issue of it and the social distancing and all of, you know, the kind of medical thing behind. And then you have the way that people have lived, the way they've always lived. So, you know, I see a lot of kind of, I don't want to say they're geezers, but like people on the piazza, and they're just not really wearing their masks, and they smoke cigarettes, and I think that they are hard to, not that they're hard to manage, but they're just going to hug who they want to. They're going to smoke when they want to. They're going to social distance in the way. I think it's going to be in Italy quite interesting to see, because people are rebellious in a certain way. The government has tried to tell them what to do, society has told them what to do, but you know, if they want to go and play cards with 4 other old guys in the forest, I don't know. It's a different society.
And I mean, in terms of just international travel, it's just really a complex issue, starting with the airplane, and I just don't think we can know at this point.
No, we're apparently going to get to start traveling again within Italy on the 3rd of June.
So will you be heading for Liguria and Puglia, or your favorite summer places?
Yeah, so I've already rented a place in Vernazza, and they say that there are like no other tourists there, and that the water has never been there.
That sounds wonderful.
About that, but at the same time, we're all Jacopo and my son and I are just like, oh, we're gonna go, and then go down to Puglia.
Those are your favorite summer places, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, the Cinque Terre is nothing more beautiful in all of Italy, but it's usually quite crowded. So maybe this will be kind of the ideal trip there.
There are a lot of cruise ships that come through to Livorno, La Spezia, and then they come for the day. So a lot of people here, you know, Venice, Florence, Rome, certainly, very concerned about kind of the economic future, but at the same time, maybe haven't had their cities open to them and to enjoy in the way that we are now. So it's quite complicated.
Yeah, in terms of how travel is going to change, one would hope that there'd be more regulation of those huge cruise ships, particularly going into Venice. Just, they've got to do better. I mean, not that cruises should be banned or anything, but they really need to clean up their acts with trash and waste, and they also just shouldn't drop 3,000 people onto one city in one morning. It's just not going to work, but we'll see. We'll see.
So this next question, I'm actually combining a question from Kelly and a comment from Doug. Kelly asked what your thoughts are specifically on Capri and the Amalfi Coast, which it sounds like it is an area that she really loves. And Doug mentioned that, Frances, you wrote about both of those areas in your book, A Year of Travel.
Yes, those are great areas. And maybe Ondine can talk about how the coast of Puglia compares with the Amalfi Coast, because the Amalfi Coast is really popular with tourists. Capri is one of the surprisingly best walking places in the world. You don't think of it as that kind of destination, but it is. There's the beautiful little piazza where Jacqueline Kennedy wore the big sunglasses, and Grace Kelly and so forth, the glamorous village of Capri with all the designer shops. But then you get out of that little village and onto these tiny trails going by beautiful flower-colored houses and gorgeous views. It's one of my favorite places to walk in the whole world, and I would definitely recommend going there, particularly if you can go anytime off season. Even if you have to go there during the season, a lot of people leave at 4 o'clock because they come over on a ferry, and the last ferry goes back at 4. So the island kind of reverts to itself at that point, and it's still a paradise. Amalfi is just break your heart beautiful. You can't overstate just the flamboyant beauty of that place. And I would definitely recommend going there. It's also a great place to hike. Besides sitting in all those piazzas, having Aperol spritzes and having a great time. The water around there is glorious. Getting a boat, somebody to take you from place to place in a boat's one of the best things to do. And do you think the coast of Puglia compares, especially up there around the Gargano Peninsula?
I mean, I'm kind of obsessed now with getting a place in the Salento. I think it might be quarantine fever, but I want to go because Salento, you can go to the Ionian side or the Mediterranean side within 20 minutes of both. So I love Amalfi, but it's a little bit like more kind of honeymoon territory. It's beautiful, but I want to go somewhere a little bit more off the beaten path. So Calabria, Puglia, the Aeolians, Marsamamian, Sicily. Not to say anything bad about Amalfi, I love it, but I'm ready to kind of look for other areas.
No, although I've been to Sicily many times, I've never been to the Aeolian Islands, and I know that you have been there. That's definitely on my list. Island places and Stromboli and Serrano, or what's the name of that one?
Yeah.
Anyway, I'd love to go to the Aeolians.
Yeah, they're beautiful.
I've got a question for the both of you. So for, say, a tourist planning a trip to Italy now and looking towards the future, maybe they've been to Rome, maybe they've been to Italy, maybe they've been to Venice. Where do you think, what should they do? Should they rent a car? Should they, where should they go? Or dream of going, daydream.
I mean, I think that Abruzzo, Le Marche, the interior, Molise, all of these areas are not touristy at all. I would definitely do a road trip. I could recommend a good road trip if somebody wants to ask me.
I love that trip across the Dolomites, the Dolomite Trail. That's one of the great road trips there. A place but very few people go that I love is Friuli. It's on the eastern side of Venice on the Slovenian border. It's such a great region and it has a lot of beaches, a lot of beautiful small towns. You could pack up your bag and move there any minute. They're just utterly livable. The best white wine imaginable. It's where I learned that white wine can be as complex as red wine. The food is, I will just say, I think it's my favorite place to eat in Italy, is Friuli. It has a big hunting tradition, lots of mushrooms, lots of foraging, use of kind of odd ingredients like hops, and lots of hands-on chefs right in the kitchen there. It's just beautiful area, lots of green, deep lakes, and the capital city of Friuli is Trieste, which is just a fascinating farthest east city in Italy, and quite a mysterious city, I think. Because it's kind of like, it's not really Italy, it's not really Slovenia, it's a kind of in-between place. And that was one of the great books that I read when traveling, was Jan Morris's book on Trieste. She's spent a lot of time there in the past, and that's a wonderful travel book. Friuli is beautiful. everyone goes to Venice, but very few people go out into the Veneto, the countryside. It's a Prosecco area where all the great Proseccos are made. There's a little town called Este where they make the most beautiful china. I went in this little china fabrica and I started looking at the china and turned over the plates, and they were all made for fancy shops in New York, out in the middle of nowhere in the Veneto. It's a great area for thermal baths and just great small towns. Taking trains is easy, but as Ondine says, the best way if you're going to out of the way places, of course, is to have a car. And when I first started writing See You in the Piazza, we rented a car in Puglia, and we kept finding these tiny places that the GPS didn't even take us to. They would abandon us in the middle of an olive grove, and we would find these tiny little towns where they make the loaves of bread that are about that big, and you grab one of these loaves of bread. We had it between us in the car, pulling off big hunks of this bread and eating it as we drove around. It was a revelation to travel like that. So going from town to town, city to city, the train is the best. Italy's trains are wonderful. There's the Italo, and then there are the other trains called the Frecciarossa, the Freccia Argento, the silver arrow, the red arrow, the white arrow. They're fast. They're like business class on an airplane. They come around serving little sandwiches and chocolates and coffees, and you don't even want to get to your destination because the train is so wonderful. And there are a lot of them. There are more and more. If you look at Trainee Italia, trainee.it, you can see all the possibilities for taking the train. And then, of course, just traveling around in Tuscany, there are the daily trains you hop on. In Cortona, 10 minutes later, you're off in Arezzo, and it's so much easier than the 40-minute drive. It's a 10-minute train trip. The trains are just, they're so civilized. I love taking the trains. And then Italy has Alitalia, which has numerous inner city flights. It's so easy to get from Tuscany to Sicily or Sardinia, or from Rome to Milan on these very short flights. But really the trains can get you there almost as quickly, and it's such a pleasant way to travel. I just always feel like I'm in Europe when I get on the train and I have my book and I get seated by the window, and it just seems like this is it. I'm here.
I just wanted to say something about, my son, he's 10 now. He loves Frances. Wanted to talk to her today. But it's interesting to see how he is attached to certain parts of the country. So he's absolutely fixated that we're going to go up to Cinque Terre as soon as we open up on the 3rd of June, and then down to Puglia. But it's kind of this easy life and complicated, for most people it'd be very hard to go and have anchovies in a particular place and have somebody hug you and play soccer with you and see you grow twice a year, in the case of Renat's. But I think that's what we all love about it. Italy is kind of like, it's so intimate in a way. It's so intimate. And, once you meet that one bartender or that one person who takes you on a boat ride or that one manager at a hotel, people kind of remember you forever. And it's very special.
It is, if you stay even in Rome, which is a huge city, you stay in Rome 3 days and you go to the same bar for your cappuccino each morning. By the third morning, they know how you want your coffee. It's just that intimacy that I respond to so much in Italy. There's still this deep humanism there that makes you feel like you're at home. And so many people have said to me, I don't have a drop of Italian blood, but the minute I got to Italy, I felt at home. And I felt that myself, and I thought I was unique. And then over the years, hundreds of people have told me that. And I think that's why, exactly why, is that that intimacy you mentioned. It's that human contact. It's the only place I know where I've had a flat tire in front of someone's house and they invited me into lunch. You know, that happens. It still happens. My neighbor, Placido, who's in all my books, he's very friendly. He goes in town every morning and he meets people. He meets foreigners in town. Sometimes he invites them home. It still is kind of like that. You still, around town, you can still pick up hitchhikers. I mean, I wouldn't do that in a million years here, but you see somebody heading down the hill to the train and you give them a lift. It's still like that.
So I'm afraid that is just about all we have time for, and that actually is a lovely note to end on. It will certainly be fueling my armchair travel dreams until I can start traveling for real again. So thank you so much to both Ondine and Frances. This was a truly lovely evening. Thank you all of the rest of you for being here, and please join us. Our next Northshire Live is on Thursday at 5 with Jessica Anthony, who's written a very hilarious political satire. So Frances and Ondine, thank you so much.
Thank
and
you.
everyone, we'll see you again soon.
Coming.
Thank you all so much. It was a real pleasure. I hope you all enjoyed it.
Thank you.
See you soon. Take
Thank
care.
you.
Bye, Barbara.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.